Hey y'all, Patrick here with Vetted. All right, we've got an amazing video today. I did say that I was going to be making a video about a Julian Dory interview with Ron James, but I'm actually going to be doing that tomorrow just because there's a lot to unpack there. But I am going to show a clip from that in relation to the video we're going to be talking about today, which is Garry Nolan. Okay, Garry Nolan having extraterrestrial pieces of crashed craft, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, right? Like a UFO, pieces of a UFO potentially, right? So I've got a bunch of clips that we're going to look at that sort of tackle different things he said about that, all right? And a claim he's made about if aliens have visited Earth, right? So here's the clips we're going to be looking at. Two Lex Friedman clips, okay? UFO explosion fragments from Brazil. I've got the Jesse Michaels interview where we're actually going to see some of the pieces. The interview he did with Salt. Another Lex Friedman clip is the U.S. government in possession of UFOs. And then the Julian Dory interview where he talks about Garry Nolan. Because he's got Ron James has a documentary out called The Accidental Truth. I highly recommend you watch it. It's good, but really this interview with that documentary is what makes it good. Because all the behind the scenes information about how this documentary came together and whatever, and that's what the video I'm going to be making tomorrow. There's just so much to unpack with that I'm going to need another day to get all that together. So anyway, let's jump into this clip where he's talking about Dr. Garry Nolan, and then we'll go to some of these other clips. All right, let's jump in.
Well, you keep on, you've brought up Dr. Garry Nolan. He's a doctor, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a professor of pathology. Actually.
I always err on that side. I was pretty sure that sounded right in my head, but I had to make sure. You brought him up a few times today, and you've talked a little bit about like some of this testing he's done. Mm-hmm. But one of the things you talk about in your documentary is how seemingly, according to him...
Okay, real quick. Who is Garry Nolan? I'm going to put clips or links to all these clips real quick. So Garry Nolan is an American immunologist, academic, inventor, and business executive. He works at Stanford University, the School of Medicine. So he's just, look at all these awards and honors and research papers. And I mean, this guy is no joke, okay? Patents, I mean, research, his education, it's honestly amazing. So again, I'll put a link to this so you can, if you want to learn more about him, can read all this. It's really quite amazing. So anyway, sorry, I should have shown that first, but anyway, let's get back to this.
He fell into this kind of by accident. And if I remember this correctly, it had to do with he was studying like cancer or something metallically.
Well, there's right? Two things that his work led him to. One is he developed a special type of mass spectrometry. The guy's a genius.
English.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That's where you could put a piece of something into a machine and it'll tell you what it's made of.
Okay.
So he developed a very specialized version of that. The guy is quite a genius.
So a little bit more about that machine. He didn't necessarily build the machine, but he adapted the machine in a specific way to study metals. And when people found out about that, they were like, hey, let's, he was like, I don't know if he said it or someone said it to him, Jacques Vallée, and other people started sending him materials. He's like, I can use this machine to, study this stuff, right? So the guy's a genius. So let's start there, right? Garry Nolan is a genius. There's no other way to put it.
And I think he's become rich off of some of the stuff that he's invented and patented. And
he's out of Stanford too?
Yeah,
right?
He's at Stanford, yeah.
Okay.
So he invented a certain type of mass spectrometry, and one of the things that they were using in it was like a metal tag to give a consistent reading throughout stuff. So like you'll tag something with something so that you can use it to gauge anomalous responses by the machine. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in other words, if you have a piece of aluminum and you put it in with another sample, as long as that piece of aluminum comes out reading exactly like that piece of aluminum should read, then you can rely on the other readings because you have the piece of aluminum to gauge the exactness of the machine's
Makes
work.
sense.
So he had developed this special type of mass spectrometry that used
So pay attention to all this. This is going to be very important for these clips coming up.
metal tags. And he was approached, and he says, yeah, I have this machine nobody else has. And so he got the chance to study materials.
I can't remember. Did he say who approached him?
Well, he said Jacques Vallée was one of them. And Jacques has
The
some
famous
of the stuff.
French scientist.
Yeah, he's got some of the materials from Brazil, from UFO things, possibly James Fox's, possibly other ones. That's well known. But he also says, you know, I was approached by Jacques and others.
We're going to get to that others. Okay, this is very interesting. It's not a bombshell necessarily unless you haven't heard it, but it's hidden within a video and it's briefly mentioned. And I don't think people have caught on to that, but I've got that. It's from the Jesse Michaels video. So anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
And that's one of the biggest cool things in the movie is that I researched him, and he did an interview with Jesse Michaels where he told this guy, Jesse's a podcaster, he says he told him supposedly that he can show you some of this stuff, but I can't show you other stuff because of national security concerns. But then he went on the Lex Friedman interview, Lex Friedman's show, and he said, yes, I've been given stuff by people, you know, not like the government or anybody. And so I confronted him on that. I'm like, look, in one podcast, you said you had stuff you couldn't show because of national security concerns. And then in another interview, you said you hadn't been given materials by the government. So kind of which is it? And that's, you know, that's another accidental truth moment in the film where he just kind of, you know.
I recommend the film, and that is in there. I've watched it. I can't show any clips because it's copyrighted, so you're going to have to watch it yourself and see that. And it is in it. It's near the end, you know, the last third of the film.
His response is worth the $4.99.
I agree.
So that's the kind of thing that you see in the movie, but it's very clear that he's been studying classified materials that are of unknown origin, and what he will tell you off camera very candidly, it confirms that. But what we put in the movie confirms it. And then he went on to he was given brain scans of victims of the Havana syndrome.
Oh.
So, okay, we're not going to get into that exactly. So let's move on to the next clip here. You know what? Let's go to the Jesse Michaels interview where he talks about some of this.
Is there any way we can see the materials?
I mean, I have some in a locked bank account. Honestly, I don't have it hanging around here.
Okay, okay.
I could do a video for you and send it.
This is also an easy flight, so I could come back up. Whatever. Is it?
Oh, okay.
Professor Garry Nolan, thanks for having us back. We're here a week later. Very excitingly, we have parts of possible UFO crashes. So what's the background on what we're looking at now?
Okay, the parts were a little anticlimactic and small, but he claims to have much bigger parts that we can't see due to national security sensitivities. But let's just take these three facts combined about the parts that are on the table. Number 1, observers with no real monetary incentive to lie claim to see a vehicle that broke the bounds of our current understanding of aerospace limitations. 2, the materials contain isotope ratios that do not exist naturally on Earth. And number 3, a top Stanford microbiologist isn't ruling out the fact that these parts could be of extraterrestrial origin. Given all that, even though these pieces are small, I think they should get you pretty excited.
And we now know that isotope ratios might have more to do with the properties of the material themselves and the features and what the material can actually do in the physical world than we had previously thought, right?
Right, correct. The odd thing was that the other piece, which supposedly came from the same event, had exactly the correct isotope ratios as to what you would find on Earth. The material up front was what we would say inhomogeneous or partially mixed. It's kind of like if you were to take chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream, and then just do a little bit of a swirl, you would see a mixture, and we would call that inhomogeneous. Why would you mix some of these elements?
Yeah.
There's actually, again, no good reason. There's no metal that people normally make that have some of the mixtures that we've seen. That's interesting.
That's worthy of investigation.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
worthy.
So that covers all of the anomalies about the pieces of magnesium coming from Ubatuba. But what about
Ubatuba, Brazil. So pay attention to that.
the other sample on the table? Those are pieces of bismuth. Nolan actually couldn't recall how it was procured, so
Bismuth is brought up a lot in the UFO community with materials.
we had to call Hal Puthoff to get the full scoop.
Hal.
Hi, Hal.
Dr. Hal Puthoff has one of the most interesting careers of all time. He was first a laser physicist, and then out of Stanford Research Institute, he started the government's psychic spy program. Since then, he's been doing frontier tech research and has briefed multiple presidents on UFOs.
So do you know the original story of how it was kind of procured initially?
So we're going to get to this real quick. Jesse Michaels has a interview with Hal Puthoff that's fascinating, with Eric Weinstein there as well. And there's a lot of back and forth, pushback. It's a great interview, to be honest with you. And Hal Puthoff, you know, he's at the center of a lot of parts to the UFO community, lots of stories, events, right? The Wilson memo. It's believed that potentially, you know, that Hal Puthoff may be someone that passed those documents around, showed them to people. I don't know, just saying.
Was that it was sent anonymously by someone claiming to be an Army officer.
Long story short, this Army officer was going through his grandfather's archives when he found this rare sample.
And then written in the diary was that it was a piece from Roswell.
True or not, these thin layers of bismuth magnesium are very hard to reproduce. Hal claims that they even have the properties to micro-size waveguides for terahertz frequencies.
It turns out that it reduces the size of the required microwave guide for terahertz frequencies down to about 1/30th of the wavelength, which is amazing. So it means you can basically put 30 waveguides in the volume of a single waveguide at terahertz frequencies.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Hal. Really appreciate it. What can you do with terahertz that we can't with current radio?
Well,
it's just more, pack in more information.
Pack in more information faster, farther.
Yeah.
Terahertz is the next thing for communication, that if we can get terahertz waves working efficiently, there's a whole slew of other electronic and radio communication things that can be done that can't be done now.
So that's interesting, right? I mean, this is fascinating, y'all. And I've seen all these clips before. You know, I've known about this, and maybe some of you watching also. So anyway, all right, that's that clip. Let's go to the Lex Friedman interview here. Again, I'm going to put clips to all of the, or links to all of these clips, all right?
You've also looked at UFO materials. You are in possession of UFO materials yourself.
Claimed UFO materials.
Alleged UFO materials. That's right. Some, what's another term? Weird materials that don't seem to
That have a story.
They have a story that doesn't seem to be of natural origins, but it's not. You know, there's a process to proving that, and that process may take decades, if not centuries, because you have to keep pulling at the string and discover where they could possibly come from. But anyway, you're in possession of some materials of this kind. Can you describe some of them, and maybe also talk to the process of how you investigate them? How do you analyze them?
Right. So let's say that there's two classes of materials that I've been given by people, and they're not given by like the government or anything, just given people who've collected them. And there's
not the government, right? There's something there. Clearly, Garry Nolan in the Accidental Truth documentary from Ron James, he does say he slipped up, and an accidental truth, meaning he probably did get it from the government, right? Because he's studying classified materials that he can't talk about. So he can't say it, which is interesting, y'all. That's an interesting piece to think about.
A reasonable chain of evidence associated with them.
Basically, there's more materials in those little pieces we saw, right? You heard that said, right? So what else? Is he big materials? I mean, with his machine, he can't exactly study these huge pieces, but maybe they're able to break off or so. I don't know, right? It's fascinating. This is the stuff that we should be looking into and studying. It's all the stuff that falls between the cracks, right? Not all these promises of a photo coming out and this and that and, just wait till 2024, next there'll be something, the next hearing and this, that. This is the stuff. It's the devil's in the details, right?
That you believe is not just a pebble somebody picked up off a road. There are almost always things that people have claimed have either been dropped off as like some sort of a leftover material, molten metals, or they are from an object that was released from this that kind of exploded. They're almost always metals. I have some couple of things that might be biological that are interesting that I haven't really spent a lot of time on yet.
What? That's interesting.
When you look at a metal, you basically, what are the elements in it? And what's it made of? And so there's pretty standard approaches to doing that.
That biologic comment, right? That hasn't been talked about. And I think that needs to be focused on as well. I will look into that and see if I make a video on it. Much more than that, there's really not much more to talk about there, right? But I'll look into that and see if there's more to that and see what we can find.
Most of them involve a technology called mass spectrometry.
So again, if anybody knows anything about that, please leave a comment down below, right? What biological materials does Garry Nolan have that could be potentially extraterrestrial that he hasn't looked at yet, which is interesting, right? Wouldn't that be I'd be right on that. But again, some of this stuff, I've heard him, I think in the Jesse Michaels interview, he says, if you watch that whole video, it's fantastic, by the way, that stuff costs money. Costs a lot of money to do it, and he needs funding to get some of this stuff done, right? And that's sort of the issue with some of this is that, we spend all our time looking at all this other stuff and spending money on all this other stuff. Honestly, I wish there was, some way that the UFO community could support some sort of general funding, right, to help study some of this stuff instead of books and documentaries and, right, all these other things that people want to have supported, right? Giving money to ufologists. And I'm not saying they don't deserve, stuff to help just fund their lifestyle, their life, right? Pay their bills so that they can continue to do research. But some sort of general, a GoFundMe, as an example, something like that to help fund research like this kind of stuff, actual materials that we should be looking into, right? So anyway, I don't know. What do y'all think about that? I'm not starting anything like that. By the way, I'm just saying that would be interesting. Who would lead it? Who would control the funding? Like Galileo Project, Avi Loeb, right? My interview with him, he got funding, right, to go out and do stuff and find stuff, and and that's the kind of stuff I support, to be honest with you, more than anything.
And there's probably about 5 or 6 different kinds of mass spectrometry that you could bring to bear on answering it. And they either tell you, depending upon the limit of the resolution of the instrument, they either tell you the elements that are there, or they tell you the isotopes that are there. And you're interested not just in knowing whether something is there or not, you're interested in knowing whether there are, the amounts of it. And in the case of elements, how many different isotopes are there? And that's kind of where, in some of these cases, it gets interesting, right? Because in at least one of the materials, as we first studied it, the isotope ratios of, in this case, it was magnesium, are way off normal. And I just don't know why. It doesn't prove anything. It just all it proves is that it was probably accomplished by some kind of an industrial process, whether it's the result of a process or whether, and this is sort of the leftover, or whether it was made that way for a particular purpose, I don't know. All I know is that it was engineered. That's it, right? But then the question is sort of, you go one step deeper. Why would you engineer it?
Right. Well, why and what does the engineered means? There's all kinds of. It could be a byproduct. It could be the main result of an engineering process. It would be a small part of the engineering process that is the main part.
Well, so the ratios of isotopes for any given element are basically the result of stellar processes. A supernova blew up sometime several billion years ago. That became a cloud. Those atoms coalesced gravitationally to form another sun and a ring that became a rocky planet. And the ratios of the isotopes were determined at the time of that explosion. And so everything in the local solar system is more or less of that ratio, depending upon certain gravitational difference, but by fragments of a percent, not whole tens of percent difference.
So anyway, watch the rest of this clip. It's very interesting. And by the way, Lex Friedman is also a smart guy. If you don't follow his podcast, you should. He's amazing. Works at MIT. Super smart. And he's into robotics and engineering and just science. And he's amazing. He's been on Joe Rogan a lot, but his podcast in particular, he just has some of the most amazing interviews. So, all right, let's jump to this next clip here with Lex and him.
Again, put our sort of philosophical hats on. Do you think the U.S. government or some other government is in possession of something of extraterrestrial origin that is far more impressive than anything we've seen in the public?
I've not seen anything personally, but if I believe the people who I don't think can lie, yes.
How does that make you feel in terms of the way government works, the way our human civilization works, that there might be things like that and they're not public? Is there a hopeful message for transparency that's possible? Like if you were in power, and I'm not saying president, because maybe the president is not the source of power here, would you release this information in some way or form?
Yes. If I were, I think it would. I think it's something that can bring humanity together, right? I think that knowledge of this kind of thing, to know that we are more alike than we are different in comparison to whatever this is a positive thing for us. And to know, I don't necessarily care that the government has been hiding it. And I think, people who've been talking about we should give government officials or whatever amnesty, I think that's probably the right answer. This isn't a time to look back and say, you did something wrong. You did whatever you did because that was the data you had available to you at the time, and you had good reasons for doing it. Now, if your reasons were selfish, if your reasons were you wanted to do it because you wanted to monetize it yourself to your benefit, but against that of others, then I think maybe there's something else that could be said. But an opportunity to get all this information out, if I were in charge, I would try to do it. Now, I might be shown something though that says, there's a reason why you don't want to let anybody know this. Maybe you don't want everybody having access to unlimited energy, because maybe you might turn it into a bomb.
Or something that gives you hints that something like unlimited energy is possible, but you haven't figured it out yet. And if you make it public, maybe some of the other governments you have tensions with will figure it out first.
Right.
I mean,
It's kind of an arms race going on, I think.
you know,
This is an interesting clip as well. But to end on a great clip here from Garry Nolan. Again, I'm going to put links to all these clips so you can watch the full clips and interviews and everything. This is quite fascinating. Now, this happened in May 22nd, 2023, and you may have already seen this clip, but you may not have. And if you haven't, get ready.
I'm curious, do you believe that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited planet Earth?
I think you can go a step further. It hasn't just visited, it's been here a long time, and it's still here. And it has basically, people talk about the wow signal, looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. The wow signal is that people see it on an almost regular basis. That's the communication that's already here.
And that statement seems so incredible that it's tough to believe, right? Like, people hear that, and maybe a lot of people here hear that, and they don't believe it. And so I'm curious, if you
Why should we believe it, right?
had to assign a probability to that statement that you believe extraterrestrial intelligence has visited this planet, what probability would you assign?
100%. And that's not just my opinion.
Wow, right? If you haven't seen this, that's crazy, right? This guy, why is he saying that?
I mean, look, the National Defense Appropriation Act, passed last year, signed by Biden in December.
The NDAA, right? That's what we're waiting to be signed this December. That could include the UAP Disclosure Act from Chuck Schumer, right? From the Senate. It's got to get approved from the House as well. And then finally signed by the president. And then get enacted the next year, right? That's what he's talking about.
30 pages of that is the establishment of an unidentified aerial phenomenon office, the establishment of looking into the harm that's happened to any of a number of the individuals, going back to 1940.
So this is before July when Chuck Schumer is talking about the UAP Disclosure Act. So he's talking about an office to be created. I don't know if this is similar, information or what that is. Arrow has already been established, so he's not talking about Arrow.
45, and looking at the disinformation and misinformation that has been basically.
I think this is the seed for what Chuck Schumer then made in July. I can't verify that. I'm just speculating. What do y'all think?
Articulated over the decades. 12 U.S. senators have signed on to a document that basically says we want the information. The establishment of an office, Arrow, in the Department of Defense, has 25 people working in it right now. And what's their goal? Collecting the information across all of the U.S. Department of Defense intelligence offices, and collation of that into a uniform format for the very first time, and provision of that then to Congress. The creation of a whistleblowers program specifically that allows people from within, who I'm going to say this, who've been working on the reverse engineering programs, reverse engineering of objects, so that they can come in and break their oaths, but specifically just to talk to Congress and give that information in classified settings. And that the most recent one that happened was just last weekend, and it created quite a hornet's nest in Washington.
So this is literally a couple weeks before David Grush's interview with News Nation comes out, right? Because David Grush retires in April. So does Garry Nolan already know about David Grush? That would be interesting to find out. Someone needs to ask him that in his next interview. And we've tried to get Garry Nolan on, but he's not doing any more interviews right now. He's getting too many offers, and he's just on hold He may do a few here and there, but he's not trying to do a bunch. So anyway, that's interesting, right? All of this is so interesting. It's a web, guys. It's hard to connect everything for what's going on, right? So I hope this video helped condense it down a little bit, even though it's kind of a long video, right? 30 minutes, but I'm bringing a lot of clips, a lot of stuff all together, so it should make it easier than having to watch 4 hours of stuff to get to this point. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I can't wait to read them. And look forward to the video tomorrow. Again, I'm going to dive deep into the Julian Dory interview about, you know what? I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of tomorrow's video before we go, because this is what I'm going to talk about. Here we go. Where is it? 2:15:30. I've got the timestamp right here. All right, here we go. So this is a teaser for what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow on the video.
See, it's not that I don't think that Lou or Chris either are full of shit. I think that what we're dealing with here is that at the beginning of this 2017, there was this decision made by a lot of people that we're going to roll this out, but we're going to do it with this new narrative. And again, the new narrative is whitewashes everything from the end of Blue Book all the way till the beginning of ATIP and pretends there was no official government study of this in that time. And that is ultimately where all the deception and all the lies are buried, and that's why they're whitewashing it with the new story. So
anyway, that's just a little teaser of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow and more with that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button if you did. Again, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, guys. Me and Mac, we're out. All right, guys, remember, every day is a gift. We'll see you tomorrow in the next video. Peace.